Senator Lieberman, thank you for the time. All right, so we've got this key deadline coming up on Friday. What do you think the administration should do?
Well, I think the administration should respond to the continued bad behavior by Iran by increasing sanctions. There's plenty of authority that the president has under existing law to impose sanctions on the Iranian government and the leaders of it, particularly for human rights violations and for support of terrorism throughout the Middle East and frankly, beyond. I hope that these sanctions will focus in on the Guard Corps, which is really the instrument of the Ayatollah at the top to suppress and brutalize the people, which they have in the streets recently. This is a very different situation we're coming to. One, the transition from President Obama to President Trump has toughened our position against Iran, which I appreciate. Two, there's no reflexive desire to defend the Iran nuclear agreement, which I think was a bad agreement. And three, the people of Iran have now risen up with tremendous courage and risk and protested this government, which they want out. They want freedom. They want opportunity.
Senator, a lot of Republicans up on Capitol Hill suggesting that this was a bad deal to begin with, but now they want to see it enforced. Let me get your take on this. You said that there needs to be additional sanctions. Should oil sanctions be on the table, additional oil sanctions?
Yeah, I would put everything on the table, including additional oil sanctions. You know, one of the things that our organization, United Against Nuclear Iran, bipartisan, has focused on from its beginning about 8 or 9 years ago is convincing businesses, not just American, but European, Asian, stay out of Iran. It's too risky. And when you think about the unrest that's occurring now in the streets of Iran, the risk is even raised. So I'm confident that tough new sanctions, I hope some directly against the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, against the Islamic Republican Guard Corps, against the Broadcasting Corporation, which has been used as an instrument of suppression of the Iranian people. I hope they're sanctioned as part of this, and I think it's not so bad to do the same to the oil industry in Iran, because this is all part of the same conglomerate. You know, you have to view Iran as a theological a corporation. It's a business, and it's run by a bunch of thugs who have tyrannized their own people.
It's run by a bunch of thugs, but some of our European counterparts are still doing business there. How can President Trump, Senator, get the Europeans out of dealing with Iran? And how would you grade President Trump and this administration in how they've dealt with Iran so far?
Well, I would give them an A. In other words,
really?
I think that I disagree with a lot of other things President Trump has done, but on Iran, we went from an administration that was so focused on reaching this nuclear agreement that they tolerated suppression of human rights, turned a deaf ear to the protests in Iran by the people after the elections, stolen elections of June of 2009, supported Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis in Yemen, just let them get away with it. President Trump has now basically said, we know who our friends are in the Middle East. The friends are the Arab nations and Israel, and we're going to support them. And we know who our enemies are, and that's Iran and the radical Islamic terrorists. So I'd give him an A. I think that with regard to Europe, the sanctions that we have continued to apply, and ones President will apply, I'm confident, by the end of this week, will and should discourage European businesses, notwithstanding whatever their governments are saying, to go back into Iran. And European banks have been very principled on this. They haven't been financing deals in Iran because they're too risky, and I appreciate their willingness to do that. I think it's still possible that President Trump will not break out of the Iran nuclear agreement altogether, even though he'll sanction and punish the Iranians for their bad behavior, because he may want to give them a little more time to try to bring the Europeans along to recognize that as long as this radical government is running Iran, the rest of the world is not safe.
Senator, there's a lot of other moving geopolitical parts, and in fact, some of the sources I talk with in the intelligence community tell me that the concern about the relationship between Iran and North Korea and back-channel communications could pose significant geopolitical risk moving forward. What are your concerns about the dynamic, especially as we're just a couple of weeks out from the Winter Olympics, between Iran and North Korea?
This is a really important matter which has been discussed all too little. And I'm going to go based on public sources, not any classified intelligence. The truth is, as we know from public sources, there have been cooperation between Iran and North Korea on nuclear weapons development and on missile development. And you can find in public reports indications of the presence of North Koreans in Iran and Iranians in North Korea at critical moments in the development of those two programs. In my own opinion, this is a suspicion. I'm not saying it's a fact. But the North Koreans have advanced their nuclear weapons and missile programs so dramatically in the last couple of years that the money had to come from somewhere. And I worry that it essentially came from Iran. And that in some ways Iran has contracted out its nuclear weapons development program to North Korea, while it's technically obeying some of the Iran nuclear agreement provisions about what it's doing inside Iran. It's doing everything it's not supposed to do through North Korea, and then it will buy what they produce.
Senator, let me jump in here. A broader question. You were at one point being considered for FBI director. That didn't happen. Is there a position that you would like to fill now?
No, that was a total surprise. I'm very happy doing what I'm doing, more time with the family. I'm practicing law part-time. I'm teaching. I'm on a couple of corporate boards. I'm doing a lot of nonprofits like United Against Nuclear Iran. You know, I always say that I always say that if a president asks you to serve, you have a responsibility to think about it seriously, and I did at that time too. But so that would still be my answer. But trust me, I'm not yearning for anything in the federal government.
The Michael Wolff book, Fire and Fury, has it changed in any way your perception of the job the president is doing?
Well, you know, I take the book, frankly, with a grain of salt. I mean, I didn't know much about Michael Wolff. I hardly knew anything at all. Now the book is startling, and I haven't read it, but just the reports in the media. Then you hear more about Michael Wolff, and he doesn't have a reputation for being the most responsible journalist around. He tends to sort of report what he hears without validation. Now, unless the whole book is a lie, which I don't think the whole book is, there are things here to be concerned about. But I'm not reaching any conclusions about President Trump based on Michael Wolff's book. And this is part of my whole reaction, and it's not easy, to President Trump, trying to separate the flack, the tweets, everything going on around him from his policies. There's some I disagree with, like his policies on climate change. There's some I agree with, like his policies on Iran.
We have to leave it there, unfortunately, but former senator from the great state neighboring us here of Connecticut, and now